All right. Can't use the stuffed camera with it. What? What the hell does that mean? Cameras can't use the camera. Come on. Oh, there you go. Okay. Let's see. Right. What is that? All right. Hey. Can you share the password? Oh, sure. It's unfortunately it's not an easy password to memorize. So let me write this down then. Wait, hold on. Hey, Kevin.
Hello.
Awesome.
There we go.
Yay.
Yeah, it's live and everything. Yeah, you just gotta copy and paste that link up top.
Awesome. Yes. Who knew? Okay, give me a second. I am going to paste some Wi-Fi passwords for folks here. Give me a second.
Cool.
Everyone can hear Kevin okay? Thumbs up? Good. Excellent, guys. So it is SO Cinema Wi-Fi SSID ATT496 password 7019531. Everyone can see that okay? Great. Awesome. Cool. And then, you know, oh, sorry. Well, no problem. And I'll keep it in the corner while, yeah, see, this is a little tougher though. Let's see. Kevin, do you remember how to share the link? Okay, here it is. All right. And then...
Right, yeah, it was in the corner, right?
Yeah,
right
it was in the corner. Yeah. So I'm going to post that to the Meetup page. Here you guys go. Feel free to share this. All right. And then I think we are almost good to go. Let me just get one last thing, and I'm going to let Kyler know, and then we'll go ahead and start. So thanks for your patience, you guys. Give me a second. Oh, yes, of course. The password. Password is right there. Okay. Yeah. So welcome to the meetup, you guys. Definitely a little bit cozier, so feel free to sit up close and get to know your fellow neighbors. We're kind of a standard meetup of front-end developers of all shapes and sizes. This month we meet every month, so sometimes at O Cinema right here in Wynwood, although sometimes we meet up in different places. We met up at Zumba, and for this meetup we have 2 out of 3 speakers are actually from Zumba, so we're really excited about that. And the third is Kevin Lamping, who is coming to us from San Antonio, Texas, who will be talking about UI regression testing, and he can explain that a little bit later. First off, just various things. Feel free to have some pizza if you haven't already. Also, there is a sign-up sheet at the very front. That sign-up sheet is actually for a door prize, so I will be choosing one of the emails from random, and that email will actually have get a free license to Front-End Masters. And what Front-End Masters is that they're basically a bunch of talks given by JavaScript experts. These are folks that literally travel all over the country to give conferences, conference talks on JavaScript and CSS and HTML and everything in between. Retail value is kind of pricey, which is kind of like, well, how much is it? It's like $35 a month or something crazy like that. So we actually have a free door prize, a free license for anyone to one lucky person. So that's a fun little thing. Before we usually kick it off, we usually start it with announcements. I usually give the spiel that I always do. First off, respect where it's due. O Cinema has graciously lent us our venue. They lend us to our venue for free. In exchange, we can have some of their awesome concession stands. If you guys, who here has actually never been to O Cinema before? Okay, so that's a good chunk of you guys. So O Cinema is actually an independent movie theater. They run first-run independent movies. They're actually showing a documentary of Nas. It's actually sold out, so unfortunately, even if you like Nas, you can't hang out because it's a sold-out showing. But they actually show great movies throughout the week, Friday to Sundays. Along with that, I also run, full disclosure, along with Adrian. Raise your hand, Adrian. Adrian and I run an organization called Code for Miami. That's a civic hacking brigade. We're a group of developers and designers trying to bridge the gaps between technology and being a better Miamian. So if you're interested in doing some awesome volunteering or learning how to code, because I know some of you guys are learning how to do front-end development, what better way to try out some projects that are open source and run by volunteers? We meet every Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Lab Miami, which is 6 blocks from here. So yeah, those are the 2 things from me. We have meetups every month, the first Tuesday of every month, and Kyler is the co person to help run that. So talk with me or Kyler if you ever feel like doing a talk. Does anyone have any announcements, job openings, general things they want to promote involving web development or front-end engineering? Yeah, okay, go for it, Kyle.
I mean, I'm sure both the Adrians are aware, but I think Zumba's kind of looking for back-end developers right now. I think Adrian would probably be able to tell you better what they're looking for because that's what he does.
Yeah, it's primarily PHP, not necessarily with any particular framework, but we use a lot. Not as much as we used to. We got even like 2 or 3 positions open, anywhere from junior backend dev to all the way up to senior.
Yeah. So if you have any interest in that, see either myself or David.
And we've had a meetup a couple months ago at Zumba at Hollandale Beach, and it's up in Gulfstream Park, and it's actually really cool. It's great because it's like the bridge from like the Zumba instructors to like the engineering department.
I must see it because I think December 15th have it
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Awesome. So okay, Nestor.
Yeah. And we are in Pocono Grove, and we're looking for a front-end engineer that is going to become our leader on the front-end department. We have we're putting a lot of money on the front end of our two products, and it's AngularJS at the moment. It's being migrated to AngularJS as we speak, and we have a couple of modules already. So there's a good opportunity there for anybody trying to jump from regular development position to actually a leadership position. Definitely very good compensation. I'm the CTO of the company, so my name is Nestor. Nestor Urquiza, and you can find me. Actually, I put it in your this. What is that? The switchboard.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's the perfect place to do
It's
it.
just there, so you can reply to the switchboard.
Right. Speaking of which, if anyone hasn't heard of the switchboard, why did my alt tab just stop running? Okay, there we go. And hey, you shouldn't have to read my taxes. Right. All right. So switchboard. Basically, that is the best way to describe that is that it's kind of like the Craigslist of kind of web developer positions, not just for web development jobs, I should say. If you guys are looking for feedback for projects that you're working on, if you're just looking for just general questions, if you're looking for resources, this is basically a free resource that we started up in this meetup group for the sole purpose of helping you out. This is not anything even based on money. This is just a resource for us as a community to try to like learn off of each other. So folks have promoted meetup groups, folks looking for, pardon me? Of course. It is FEDM, so Front-End Developers Miami, FEDM.switchboardhq.com. So there you go. Cool. Awesome. Does anyone have any more announcements? No? Okay, seeing none. Okay, so this is going to be cool because this is actually going to be our first time that we've actually done a Google Live with someone from outside of Miami. So this is kind of a cool little experiment that we're doing. If any of you guys have any questions, we could do this a couple ways. You can either tweet at me, and my Twitter is Ernie at OYD. Yeah, and then, or we could, I was going to say maybe we could use a hashtag, but we don't necessarily have to do that. But if you have any questions, feel free to either tweet at me, and I'll be checking the Twitter during Kevin's presentation, or, listen, you can just raise your hand, and I'll do my best to, you know, relay the question that way. But, yeah, I think with that, Kevin, I think we are ready to hear you. Why don't you start off telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, do you mind if you turn around so I can see people?
Yes, of course.
Okay. And if I'm looking to the side, it's because I have my laptop here and my second monitor here.
If it's super dark, that's because we're in a movie theater. So that is actually...
Okay. Ah, so people do exist there. Excellent.
Yes. Haha.
Hi. Okay, I live in San Antonio, Texas. I do say y'all, so I don't know if y'all say y'all, but if you do say y'all or if you don't say y'all, you know, sorry if you don't like it. I don't know where I was going with that. I just wanted to point that out. So I live in San Antonio, Texas. I am a front-end developer working with Ernie right now on the same team doing AngularJS development. But one of my passions has been CSS and HTML. That's where I kind of grew up. I've started to move more into the JavaScript side of things. But I do love to jump into the CSS side of things as well. I even almost called it the CSS, which shows that I've lost some of my talent. So that's what I do. Let's see, what's worth talking about about my personal history. I have two sons, a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old, wife as well, and yeah, they take up a ton of my time. Outside of that, I try and do a little bit of gardening, so that gets me away from the computer screen, at least part of the day. That's about most of what you need to know about my life. I can't think of anything else major besides that. So this presentation that I'm going to give is based off of a workshop that I just gave at SaaSconf. SaaSconf was a conference in New York covering SaaS. How many of y'all use SAS in your day-to-day work?
A couple hands went up.
Couple hands. Anybody make it to SASConf? No. Okay. So that means that nobody has already seen this, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get into this presentation. I don't know how long this will take, but I'm just going to go. And let's see. So this is the repo. It's on GitHub. It's public. So if you wanted to check it out, it's github.com/klamping/UI regression. And this is just open. What is in it are the workshop exercises. So not the demos, but the exercises themselves. I'm hoping to go through the first exercise and the third exercise today. If we have extra time, we'll get into the fourth one. UI regression. So maybe I should talk about what UI regression is. How many of you out there enjoy making a change and testing it on like 100 different pages to see if it's broken?
One hand.
We always have one masochist in the audience.
Yeah.
I hate doing repetitive things, and so this is like my way of trying to avoid that. I noticed that even like the smallest of changes to CSS or SAS or less can really cause a lot of havoc on even the smallest of sites. If you're just say something that will happen for me is I'll have a freelance site that I worked on 2 years ago. The client comes, hey, we want to make this update. I make the update, hey, this broke this page that had nothing to do with your update. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think to test that page. So to kind of avoid that, there are a few tools, or there's several tools out there. I'm going to cover two of them, Wraith and Phantom CSS. These tools, the essence of what they do is take a screenshot before your change and then take a screenshot after your change and compare the two. So that is the essence of the tools, and let's just jump right in to Wraith. Actually, before we get started on that, I will talk about how to install this workshop repo. You'll want to clone it down. If you're familiar with GitHub, you can clone it down to your local development environment. If not, just go to the repo and do download zip, and then go through there. If you have Node installed, a Node and npm, you can do an npm install. Let me make that a little bit bigger. npm install, that will install the stuff for the server, because we will be reviewing, you see I've got localhost, this responsive starter kit that a buddy of mine made. We're going to be doing our changes on this page. And then you get started with the first exercise. From an installation guide, this might be where you have the most trouble, is with the tool installation. There is a repo out there called this thoughtbot/laptop, and if you just run this curl script, it will install the things you need, which are ImageMagick, Node, NVM. Actually, you don't really need NVM, but Rails. These are all things that if you don't already have them, it'll install it. If you already have them, it'll leave it alone. Redis, Ruby, yeah. So those are things that are used by the 3 different tools that are covered in the workshop. So you can use that to install things. I'm going to assume that you've already got things installed and just go into the first exercise. So we have oh, okay, sorry, I think I'm hearing feedback on myself. Okay, exercises. Jump into the first exercise there. So this first one goes into a tool called Wraith. I can bring that up, Wraith.js. It's a responsive screenshot comparison tool. It runs in Ruby. The reason I bring it up, it's one of the simpler tools out there, so it doesn't quite provide the most functionality available, but it is super easy to set up. So what it does, it'll take the picture before and after, and you will see the comparison here of in blue of the parts that have changed. So this will make more sense when we do make an actual change. So that's Wraith. In the first exercise, we install it and configure it. We're going to assume that you've already done that. Here are all the requirements. So what we'll do is jump into our terminal. Let's make that bigger. So I'm in my UI regression repository, local one, and I'll do a Wraith setup. And this is going to create two files, config/config.yaml, and then javascript/snap.js. You really don't need to worry about the snap.js unless you get into the more complicated things. This is covered in a little bit of detail in exercise 2, but we're not going to get into it tonight just for the sake of time. Config.yaml is what we do want to look at. So this is what config.yaml looks like. And that is my finished version, which I don't want to get into yet. Okay, sorry, I'm just double checking that everybody can see it. Okay. In this, it's just a configuration file. We have the browser we want to test in. So for WebKit, it's Phantom.js. For Gecko/Firefox, we could test in Slimer.js if we have it installed. We'll leave it as Phantom for our needs for now. This snap file, you don't need to worry about it. You can use it to do some more advanced custom functionality, but we'll leave that as is. The directory, this is where all your screenshots are going to be output to, and your gallery is going to get output to. We'll leave it as is. This is where we'll start changing things. The domain, this is what the BBC, the people who created this tool, kind of show for their demo. And I'm going to copy and paste what we want to test and talk about that. So the way Wraith works, it takes a snapshot of your of two different websites. Normally, you would do like a staging website and a production website, or in my case here, we're going to do a local website, so the version of it that's running on my computer, and then the production website. And it's going to take a picture of both. It's going to go to each of those websites and take a picture and compare the two. The next part is screen widths. This is part of the responsive side of things, so you can do any screen width in there that you want, and it will adjust the Phantom.js wrapper to use that width. I'll get into Phantom.js in just a minute for when I get into the next tool, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, but it's basically just a browser that we can run commands on. The other part that's important with this file is the path section, and this defines all the pages you want to test. So I'm going to come in here and copy and paste this content because it's boring to watch me type. But I want to test my home page. I want to test the page that has the left sidebar, the right sidebar, two sidebars, full width, all the way down. So I would save this. The other parts of this you don't really need to worry too much about for the very beginning, so I'm going to skip over that. I'll save it, and what I would do is run Wraith. I always forget this command. Capture config. Wraith capture config. And it's going to go in and create the shots folder, and then it's going to start taking screenshots. And I just want to, we're not going to watch the whole thing because it has a lot to take, but you see it's going to snap the index at a certain width, the other one at a certain width, and then the other one's at different widths. So it just goes through and it takes screenshots of all the pages. While that runs, oops, we'll go back and it's going to create, I've already run this because it takes a long time to run. But it creates a shots directory. In that shots directory, you have all of your pages, and you can see it's got a data text file, which is the percent that has changed between the two sites. So for something, let me think, full width would have. Trying to think which one. Okay, so this one has a 3.84% difference in them. And then it has the images. So this is the diff image. This is the one with everything that's the same is grayed out. The differences are in blue. You can see that blue at the bottom. And then the local version, and I believe they have a production version. So this local and production, that's named after whatever you put in here. So local and production. So if you name that like local and live or staging and live, that would be reflected in this file name. Anyway, so you could go through that by yourself. It would take a long time to have to go through each of the folders. One thing that Wraith does that's really nice is creates this gallery.html file, and that looks like this, where we have the different pages that were tested, and then the resolutions that we tested them in. For mine, I wanted to make it quick, so I only tested 320 and 1024. But for the exercise, you should test the full range that it comes with, if you wanted to. Here, you see the percent different. So most of them are 0% different, but this one is 3.84% different. So we'll click on that image and open that up, and you can see this is the 320. And for whatever reason, the bottom of the page got clipped off. This is one of the shortcomings of these type of tools is they're not quite the most accurate with the screenshots. It's Phantom.js, and Phantom.js isn't a full browser, so it doesn't quite have, it has a few bugs in it, I would say. So it's kind of building off of those bugs. But what we're going to do is make a real change in just a moment and see what that actually looks like. If we go back to the terminal, you see this is the finished part of our output. So it finished taking all the images. It crops the images for like the thumbnails and everything. It creates the diff. Oh, there it generates the thumbnails. And then it creates the gallery. All of these are different commands that you could run if you wanted to, but you shouldn't want to. Okay. Just a second. I need to look at my assignment to see. So we've captured the images. One thing I'm going to add to make this gallery page a little more useful to me is I don't want to see when there's no difference. All I want to see are what are the diffs that happen that there is a difference. So I'm going to add a line to my YAML file that said mode diffs only. There's a couple other options out there for this. That's defined. You can read more about that in the Wraith repo. But this will basically say only when you generate the gallery, only show me the stuff that has a diff in it. So that'll be nice for kind of not having to sort through so much stuff. Okay, so we're going to go at our style sheet and make some changes. I'm going to reduce the padding on this button to 15 pixels. So instead of 20 pixels, I'm going to set it to 15. What else am I going to do? I'm reading this off the exercise sheet, so you may not be able to see it. Add the following rule set to, I'm going to add a, I'm just going to throw it in here because it's a demo. But I'm saying all links inside of page content should have a, it's like a bluish, oh no, that's a purple color. Should be purple. So that's going to change the style of the links. And then the last thing I'm going to do is update the breadcrumbs. No, wait. Let's wait to update the breadcrumbs until after I run this again. Okay. I'm going to go back into my config file, and I'm going to get rid of some of these screen widths because they take too long to run. Okay. I'll run this again. We're going to have to wait. While we wait for that to run, I'll just kind of show what I was looking through. I was running these changes here. I do have an extra credit bit. And this is kind of like, these are ideas that I had that I didn't fully flesh out as far as the instructions go. But one thing you can do with Wraith is run it in history mode. So if you don't have two sites to compare against, you can just compare it against one single file. One single site. That loads. So here they have one domain. They're only checking one website. But they add this extra history directory. If you don't add this history directory path, it's going to fail. So this is where you would capture your screenshot before your change, make your change, capture your screenshots after the change, and it would compare the two. So that's the history mode. Okay, now it's almost done with the generation. It's done. We'll open gallery back up and see. Okay, so now you see there's none with 0% difference, and that's basically because we updated every page on the site with that link color. You can see in our local version, our links are now purple compared to the blue. And if we look at the diff, you can see it's kind of highlighted that section to show, okay, these links have changed. If we keep going down, and then here's the button change that we made. So you can see it removed some of the padding, so it marks that as a difference in the diff. Let's see. If I go to the style guide page and I look at the diff here, you can see here it changed the color of this link. And if I open up the actual style guide page, you will see that we don't want that link color to change. Oh, right. We want this link to be blue. We want this link to be green. This might make more sense if I open up the original picture. So you see the color of the link matches the color of the text. So that was a regression bug that happened because of our change. We were a little too heavy-handed with the color change. So in theory, this would be something that you would have caught with Wraith. And yeah, that is all of the changes there. And that's the basics of Wraith. I'm going to show off where Wraith fails now. This part will be changing the nav breadcrumb, and that is in theme.css. We have a bottom margin of 2 EMs. I'm going to change that to 1.5 EM. And then I'm going to get rid of half of our pages. So I'll just show style guide. And then I'll only take one. That way it just goes a lot faster. We'll run it again. This time it shouldn't take as much time to run. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to mess up my screen. Let's see. I also have spoilers at the bottom. So this is if like you get stuck or you don't want to have to copy, or you don't have to type out all the different file names in there. You can just copy and paste from the bottom. That's at the bottom of each of these exercises. Let's see. Okay, so it's run. We'll go back to our gallery, refresh it. You see we have one change, but our simple padding adjustment basically has caused everything to be blue. That's one of the biggest issues that I find with Wraith, is that if you make a change to the top of the page that's like a vertical padding size change, it makes every other thing below it, like if it pushes everything else below it, it's going to show that that's a regression or a difference between the two. There's another tool that I go through here called Diffuse that doesn't suffer from the same problem. It does full-page screenshots, but it's able to handle that. And I believe the people at Wraith would just love to have a pull request that that kind of solves that problem. But I did want to illustrate that this is an issue that you might run into if you make a change and it pushes everything else down. So you add like a line of text or something, it can cause a lot of trouble. That's Wraith. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything talking about it. Nope. About 18 minutes. So let's jump into the next exercise, which isn't going to be number 2. It's going to be number 3 because I want to show off Phantom CSS. Phantom CSS is a tool similar to Wraith, except instead of taking full-page screenshots, you will take just screenshots of certain parts of the page. And that makes it a lot easier to avoid the issue we just saw, which is a change at the top of the page pushing everything else down. If we jump in here, let me see if I can show you a quick code example. I don't think they have it. Well, you'll see it in the exercise. Okay, so we're going to open this Phantom Style Guide file, which this is where I'm going to talk about Phantom.js. Phantom.js is a headless browser, and it's used for testing and automation. And so Phantom CSS is tied directly into Phantom.js. The one extra thing that it also ties into is a tool called Casper.js. So you have Phantom.js. Built on top of that is Casper.js. It's kind of like jQuery for Phantom.js. And then on top of that is Phantom CSS, which is basically responsible for telling Phantom.js to take screenshots, and then I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Telling Phantom.js to take screenshots and then comparing those, adding the diffs, and storing them, and handling all of that stuff. So we're going to init Phantom CSS here. I changed the screenshot route and failed comparison route as well. You don't need to worry about that. Here we're setting our viewport size. If you want to do some responsive testing, you would kind of write a script. I have it linked to from the repo, but it would basically do the same action on the different viewport sizes, but that's how we can set it. And then at the end, we're going to run Casper and tell Phantom CSS to exit. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is I'm going to copy and paste, just to be brief. I'm going to tell Casper to start, and I'm going to tell it where to go. Here I want it to load my style guide HTML file, which was this page. Okay, after that, I'm going to tell it to take a screenshot. This time it's going to take a screenshot of the breadcrumbs. And I'm going to undo my changes as well. Go back to the original state. Okay, we're going to tell it to take a screenshot of the breadcrumbs. You notice this is a CSS selector. So Phantom CSS goes in, it says, take a screenshot of this selector the same way you would view the element inside of like the web developer toolbar. It would take just that bit. And then I'm going to name it so that the file name makes sense. The next thing I'm going to do is take another screenshot. This time, I'm going to take it of the primary navigation. And you'll notice we've got this .then. If you are familiar with promises or Phantom, anything like that, you can just do it in this style where you're chaining them together, similar to how you would do it in jQuery. But for copy-paste sake, I just put Casper.then, so you can have that as an option. Okay, so it takes a screenshot. We then have to jump out of that and say .then again, because when it takes a screenshot, it doesn't know how long it's going to take, so we want to wait for this screenshot to finish before moving on to the next one. We might be able to pull this and put it in the same then function. I didn't. I just thought about that, and I haven't tried it out yet. The last thing we want to do is compare all of our screenshots to previous screenshots. If you leave this line out, nothing's going to happen, and you're going to be confused about why nothing happened. Okay, so that's our test. Pretty basic. We're just taking screenshots of certain parts of the page, and you could go through and write selectors for all the parts of your page and take screenshots and everything, and then we're going to compare them. So to see what that looks like, I'm going to run Casper.js test, and then the name of my scripts. So it took 2 new screenshots. It created them in these new files, or these new folders. And it says the first time here, we've generated the screenshots. These are going to act as your baseline. So when the next time you take screenshots, it's going to compare against those. So you see here we have 2 screenshots. I forgot my preview takes forever to load. But we can view it here. So now we've got our primary navigation, and then here we have our breadcrumbs. That's fine. Let me pull up what I need to change. I'm going to be changing the text decoration for all my links. That's in my global stuff. I'm going to be changing it to okay. So I've made my change. I'm going to go back into Phantom. I'm going to run it, and we should see 1 failure and 1 pass, which is exactly what we'd expect. The primary navigation passed just fine because we didn't want that they weren't already underlined, so removing the underlined wouldn't do anything. The breadcrumbs were underlined, and now there's a difference in it. We'll go back to our screenshots folder. There's a new folder called failures, and here's the failure with the part of the image highlighted in pink, showing this is what has changed. So the underline was removed. If we go into screenshot, we can see the diff, which is the image after the change. Here's the failure image. This is the one that shows the diff. I think the naming for this is a little confusing, but the failure is what you saw in Wraith as the diff column. And then the original picture here. What's important is that there were no changes in our primary navigation, so our change didn't have an impact on it, which is what we wanted. So since this takes screenshots of just the specific portions of the page, you don't have to worry about the breadcrumbs, like adding change to the padding on the breadcrumbs. You don't have to worry about that pushing all the other content down and causing a lot of false positives as far as, or maybe false negatives. I don't know the correct term. Anyway, a lot of false alarms. There we go. A lot of false alarms around your testing. Okay, about 5 more minutes left. What we can do is either delete both of these folders, run Phantom CSS again, and generate a new baseline, or we can go in and basically delete these folders or these files if I can. Great. It's taking a long time to delete. There we go. Oh, sorry, I forgot the next exercise doesn't use that folder anymore. I have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to show one other nice thing about Phantom CSS, which is that it's tied into Phantom.js and Casper.js. So anything you can do in Phantom.js or Casper.js, you can do in Phantom CSS. So if we look at our add-ons page, we have this modal dialog that pops up. So in Wraith, you wouldn't really be able to test this without having to write some pretty complex code, because you have to click on this link and then take the screenshot of it. Phantom CSS makes that a little bit easier for us because it's already in. The way you take your screenshots is tied directly into your code, and let's jump into that exercise to give more details on that. We are going to add a few new things. So we're going to test the add-ons page now. I will open it up. No, not there. It's some add-ons. Same stuff as before. I load the add-ons page. This time I'm going to run, this is a Casper.js command, and it says click this element, this selector. And then I'm going to do another part of tie into Casper.js again and run this wait for selector. So this waits for this selector to appear on the page, or this HTML element that matches this selector to appear on the page. Once it's there, we're going to run our screenshot at that point, and that's going to take a picture of our modal overlay. Just to prove that this does work, we'll do Casper.js test Phantom add-ons, run it, and it created our new image in free modal overlay. Why is it not there? New screenshot at. I couldn't make it all the way through this without it. No, should be there. Okay, it's there. My Finder must be crashing. Open that up. Okay, here we go. You see this is the mobile dialog that pops up, and we got a picture of it. The other thing we can do, you can see it kind of clipped off that X. One thing we can do is instead of using a selector to take the picture, we can actually capture a portion of the page. So you would give it the XY coordinates right here. So you'd say, I want to start at the top and left, and then I want to be this wide and this high. So that allows us to do a ton of scripting into our tests. So if we need to click an element, if we need to try and submit a form item, and then take a picture of the form to make sure that our error message is displayed correctly, any sort of thing that we want to do, we can do that from Phantom.js and from Casper.js and tie it all in. So yeah, that's the content to go through. There's another few exercises out there for diffuse, which gets into kind of a workflow, so an approval and rejection process. It has a gallery type interface, that the same thing that you saw with Wraith, which makes it a lot easier for me to make a change and then say to my coworker, hey, can you go review these screenshots and approve them and reject them whether they have passed or not. So that's diffuse. It's a really neat tool as well. It does take a little bit more setup to go through, though. So yeah, that's about my time, and I'll open up to questions now.
Cool. I think we actually had a question from Adrian. Do you want me to ask it? Or? Okay, so Adrian asked over Twitter, is there any way to run it against the mock-up? I know that you brought up a history mode, which lets you compare two screenshots. I was hoping if one of those shots could be a possible export from Photoshop.
One thing that I can imagine you doing is like exporting all of your screenshots from Photoshop, or all of your comps from Photoshop, and kind of comparing, starting a server that serves those images, and naming them the same, and like having it match up, and see if that compares from there. I would say there's another tool that I just looked at that you can kind of drag an image on top of your, like have an image on top of your browser and compare the two. I'm trying to see, it's called Xscope, and I feel like that would be a more efficient way of testing than this. This, like trying to type that in, isn't well supported right now. But let me share my screen real quick to show what it is I'm talking about. Screen one. There's this overlay mode, which basically you drag it on and it just creates an overlay over whatever your browser is. That might be a little bit more. Well, that's changing the color settings. Trying to think if there was another way. No, it's basically this overlay mode. So yeah, nothing to set up from a CSS testing perspective that I know of for that.
So I have a general question for you, Kevin. So obviously this is kind of like this kind of intense kind of testing suite. Do you use this for personal projects? I'm assuming this is something that we do at work. And if we do this at work, is this kind of something that we do in combination with other different types of testing things? Because I don't know, but I feel like a lot of folks may not necessarily be super familiar with the world of crazy front-end testing. So what other, like for folks that want to kind of implement this, especially from a workplace, where would you guys even start? Where would you even start like trying to implement this or similar kind of testing solutions?
Yeah, that depends on what type of site you're testing. If you have a very static site with not a lot of JavaScript interactivity, go Wraith. That's probably the easiest setup that you can get. It does really quick validation, so especially if you're doing like a refactoring of a site and you want to make sure, you want to change all the code behind the scenes, but you don't want to change the design at all, Wraith would be wonderful for that, because that's basically validating that your changes haven't done anything visually. If you have something with a ton of interactivity, for example, Angular, Phantom would be a good option, because you can click on items and stuff like that. I'm going to show, we do have this integrated into our framework tool. You can see here, this is a Wraith UI diff. This is something that I set up with Travis CI, which is a third-party kind of open continuous integration tool to basically, when you submit a request to GitHub, you can have it run some code. In this instance, it starts a server, does my Wraith config, and compares it to the live version. If I open that up, you can see there's some differences here. On this one...
Was that come at me, bro, aardvark thing a bot? Was that,
yes.
Was that what it was? Got it.
Yeah. And there's a GitHub script that runs to post that message. So this gets posted out to a server, and to help with like getting to that server, we post the message. So you can see here there's a difference. That difference is only because we add a menu item in production that isn't there in the local environment, or maybe it's vice versa. We add a menu item in the local environment. So this is something that we've set up. I haven't found a lot of use out of it, mainly because we've been doing a lot of JavaScript changes, and this doesn't really test those JavaScript changes. So there's that. I would say, yeah, Wraith is the easiest to set up. I'm trying to think. What else? The right tool really depends on what type of website you have. I really want to jump into Phantom.js. I want to do a refactoring soon, and I think it's a refactoring of a single page. I think I'm just going to set up a Wraith script to do that simple refactoring. So this is another thing. With Wraith, it's so easy to set it up that if you're just doing a single page that you're changing, you can just set it up in the take 10 minutes to get it set up, make your changes, and then compare it to the live version. And it should provide some value there if you're doing a change that you know isn't going to cause a lot of trouble.
Cool.
Oh, I'll follow that by saying these tools, they're about half done. All of them have really nice features along with some really lackluster features. So Phantom CSS is really great about that that functionality aspect of it, of taking just small screenshots of just the specific selectors you want. But it kind of sucks because it doesn't allow a nice little gallery that Wraith has. It doesn't have a workflow part to it. It's to create a new baseline, you have to just delete your files and run the test again. So this area is still pretty brand new. And if you are going into this, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt that things aren't 100% polished and everything. So on that note, if you do have free time, the people who run these tools would love contributions. They can use all the help they can get.
Cool. Is there any other questions from the audience?
About authentication, you need to log in or something like that.
The question was, what about authentication when you need to log in or something similar?
Right. That's the second part of the Wraith example. I'll just share my screen real quick to show you what that looks like. Share. With Wraith, you can do it pretty easily in your snap.js file. You can pass in a header. So if your authentication uses headers in like an auth token, you can do that. Or you can add a cookie. That does require you to set something up on your side as far as allowing that sort of login fake login process. This is Phantom.js code, which is the same thing that Phantom CSS runs on. So you can basically copy and paste this sort of thing to add cookies and stuff to your script so that it logs in. And the second exercise goes through authentication just like this. Really simple authentication, but yeah, that's how you could do it. As a fallback with Phantom CSS, you could just write a script to enter text into your login field and run it from there.
Cool. Awesome, Kevin. Any more questions? All right. What is the best way to get a hold of you if they do have questions or want to find out more about Left Kevin?
That would be Twitter. Username klamping, same as my username on GitHub. And I also have a Gmail address if you want to take a little bit more time. That's also klamping@gmail. So anywhere klamping.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that you have the links to some of the awesome stuff on the Meetup as well. So if you guys want to kind of do a deep dive into those exercises, you guys definitely can. So all right, dude. Everyone, please give a hand for Kevin. Thank you, sir, for spending some time, some extra time hanging out with us. Really, really, really appreciate it. We're going to have 2 more speakers. You can hang out, or I
gotta go put the kids to bed.
All right, dude. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Well, Adrian, when we have you up, cool. So cool. Thanks, Chief. All right. So while he is setting up, we will go ahead and do that and kind of continue. All right. So
You take this?
yeah. So we've got here. All right. Do you need audio?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Here goes. Let me get you. Oh, not the same type.
Not.
Okay. All right.
So good.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do this. Yeah, I might just do that then. All right. So, Adrian, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
There's some folks that just run to the bathroom.
Oh.
But yeah, I'll do that I have a slide for that. Full screen. Should we start?
Yeah.
All right. So, hello everybody. We're going to be talking about CSS specificity. This is a topic at a beginner intermediate level, and it lays the foundation for many CSS architectural patterns like block element modifier, object-oriented CSS. So it's a very interesting and very important thing to know. So my name is Adrian. I'm a front engineer for Zumba Fitness. In my spare time, I play guitar. I make things. You can find me on Twitter at AdrianCA_. And let's jump right in with an example. Let's see. All right, so specificity. and what bad specificity can do to your CSS, right? So, right. On the right side, we have the HTML and CSS view, and I just made a very, very super simple example illustrating what specificity is, right? So we have a div with the class of foo, and then on the inside we have another div with the class of bar and gizmo, and some text, right? And then you can see the preview on the left. And then down here in CSS, I'm targeting that div with the class of foo, so it'll be this one. And I'm targeting the bar, the element that has a bar class applied to it inside of that foo class, right? So I would be targeting this element right here, what's this text, the ipsum word. And I'm setting the color to be green. And that's what I get shown in the preview. But I have another line down here, which I'm targeting the bar class with, and I'm specifying the color should be red. So due to CSS inheriting and cascading style, this later class should be overriding the class above it, right? So what's going on here? That's the trick. Specificity. So before we get into how do we solve this and what are the good ideas around it, one might apply a clever hack that a lot of developers like. They're simply saying, screw it, I'm gonna make this important, right? And let me cite that. All right, okay then. So you see, it rendered red now. The important keyword will effectively override whatever other selectors might be applied. All right, so while this may seem like a clever hack, before we get into specificity and all that, let's get something out of the way right now. Important keyword, right? This is a very important matter. So whenever you get into a style sheet and you see important all around it and spread all across the style sheet, I want you guys to react like this. This is exactly how you should go about it. It's important, and that's it. The Wi-Fi allows it.
The office is that?
Yeah. There you go.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
Yeah, that should be the first reaction when looking at important all over the way in your code, in your CSS style. All right, so now with that being said, we can move on to specificity. All right, so what's the problem with specificity? It will mess up the CSS inheritance and cascading model, right? So in the previous example, we've seen how this later class wasn't actually doing what it was intended to. It was applying the styles, even though it was in a later position at a line, all the way down the style sheet, because it is not as specific as the first selector. And I have another example here, something more real world. And there is. All right, so in this example, I have a widget kind of markup, right? It's going to contain a title, and I'm going to have a subtitle inside of that, and then some content, right? So I have two of these right here. So I want my title to be red, and I want my subtitles to be green. And I'm just styling my widget with some padding, it looks something kind of nice. And then I have my title in red, and I'm selecting my subtitle like this. So I'm saying, find me a widget, find me the title inside of the widget, and find me the subtitle, which is a direct children of this title, and make the color green, right? Okay. It's working, right? Now let's say that I just want to come here and I have a second widget. Let's say that later on we added another widget to the markup, and we're having a widget with the class of title, and I just added another class here. It's just blue, and now I have another title and content. So this class blue I would just like to come in afterwards, after all this markup, all this style sheet is done, and just override the specific item that has the class blue. How would I do that, right? So I could just say, okay, I added a class blue and I just want the color blue, but that's not working here. And it's not working because it's trapping specificity. So this being said in a much user-friendly way, it only means when you target the widget class, you're creating kind of a scope. And then when you go inside of that to find an element, you're scoping that element to the widget class. When you go inside, further in, then you keep scoping all the way down, and you keep making your style as specific as this element is. So if we were to measure this, we could say, okay, I have one class here, then another class, then a children selector. So this could have a specificity of 3. I'm not gonna get into measuring specificity because it's really not, it's not the point of this talk, but clearly we'll have 3 classes down here and then just 1 here. So this later one is defeated by the class that we defined earlier, and that defeats the whole purpose of CSS cascading stuff. So how do we fix this? How do we go around this? How do we make that text effectively blue, right? All right, so this would work. Let me uncomment this line. There it is, it changed. Now it's blue. All right, and this would work because it's fighting the specificity words. So basically what I just did is I added all that scoping in front of my class, right? So I just say, okay, I want to find me the widget, find me the title, and then go to the thing that has the class blue and change the color. But then we're creating only more trouble if we follow this pattern, because if we later add another class to it, we're going to have to scope it all the way again. If we later have another modifier for this, we are always going to have to scope all the way from widget. So this is crazy. Before you even realize it, I only have 3 classes here and 3 selectors, and I have a lot of CSS already written to target the stuff that I have. And this is not even a real world application. So, back here. All right, so why is this bad? All right, it will mess up with the CSS cascading effect. It will limit your inheritance, let's say, chain, because with CSS we should be able to define the largest styles out of global scope and then descend from that into the more specific styles. Now, keep in mind that with CSS you can undo something that you already done, right? So there's no way to opt in out of this kind of specificity word, and there's no way to remove a property that you already set on class. You can only either override it or add new stuff to it. So with specificity, you have to be overriding in all of your style sheet. This also limits your reusability because you can't just get all this. When you got a class blue and you just want the text to be blue, if you have to scope it all the way and you have another widget that doesn't have all this kind of scoping and all these descendants of selectors, you can just add this class to it because it won't work. It's already scoped all the way down. And then this also prevents the expected behavior of CSS. So when you add a class blue, you would expect it to override whatever is on top of it. And this is not what is effectively happening. So this leads to a lot of copying, debugging, and frustration. When you have to go all through the style sheet, figuring out what's more specific than what, and trying to see why it's not working the way you intended it. All right, so then how do we handle this? What do we do to prevent these sort of problems? How do we go around it? All right, so there is a lot about specificity, and that's why you should start thinking about it the first moment that you start with a clean slate for the style sheet. Specificity is variable. It's a variable. It is defined in terms of what kind of selectors you're using. If you're using an ID, that's more specific than any class. The nesting, the location in the style sheet, you can opt out of it. Of course, you could use importing, but now you know better. And then you don't want to fight this specificity work because you will just go crazy with it at some point. So the simple trick, rule of thumb here is just keep it down. Just keep your specificity low from the beginning. And there's just like 3 advices that will just prepare you for dealing with specificity. And it's pretty much just aim for the lowest specificity. And what this will give you is you'll be less likely to find your way out of the specificity words if you never get into it, right? So avoid using IDs at all costs. IDs are the most specific selectors, and I don't know why at some point we started using IDs to target elements. IDs were never intended for CSS. IDs is a way of identify a specific markup code for JavaScript. So you can target it with JavaScript and have that object able to be identified uniquely in your page, right? So CSS is definitely not for that. And also nesting. So like we've seen, if you start scoping stuff, then you get all this specificity. And this is a tricky one because a lot of preprocessors these days, you got SAS, you have LESS, and they all announce nesting as a feature. Nesting is a feature, but it shouldn't be a pattern. And a lot of people just start using it, and I'm using it, and they turn into a pattern, and everything is scoped because it looks neater like that, maybe arguably, but it should be very respected because it will get you into a lot of specificity problems. And also, avoid child nesting. All these child selectors, if you really don't have to use it, then avoid it at all costs because they're super specific as well. So 2 rules of thumb for this is use the least number of selectors required to sell an element. Just go for the lower specificity that you may need. Like this will increase the chances to reuse that code, to reuse the style in any other classes that may or may not have a specificity chain. But if your selector is low enough, then you can apply it and it'll be reusable. And also, if it works without nesting it, then don't force it. Don't nest it. So a side note on nesting, and we already went through it, it's a feature, not a pattern. So it might look like it provides a namespace of sorts because you have like your widget and your title and then whatever, you go all the way in. But that this provides some kind of encapsulation, but it also comes at a cost, which is it will double your specificity and it'll make your CSS super verbose. So you have a lot of stuff coming down the wire that you might, if you just keep specificity low, you might just reduce on that too. So you'll be optimizing. Okay, so I have the last example right here, and there are some hacks for specificity. And these are useful in case that you get some kind of markup that you don't have access to. You don't know the specificity chains to it, or you really need a quick kind of hack to hack something up. And let me bring it up. Okay, so all right. The problem here is we have a button and we have some text. And then we have something declared this button with a text color that's the same as background color. And that's really bad. And all right, so here. So all my box A should have this color. And then I added a button class to it that's gonna have this this white foreground color for text. So this is not working because simply this has a higher specificity, right? This is scope, and this class is kind of like global out there. So one easy fix for this is just if you double a class, you'll get an increased specificity, and now it's really working magically. If you have a class and you just double it up or triple it up, or even like if you add like 1,000 classes, it will just bring the specificity up all the way. So you would have to, you can get around it some kind of way. And also, if you're trying to target an element with an ID, you can change that. You can go around it in any kind of way. Do this instead, right? So you can, instead of selecting something with the ID of widget, like we normally use to select the actual attribute. The element that has an attribute ID set to wicket. And the beauty about this is that it has the same specificity as a class. So if you do this, and let's see, let me see if I can quickly illustrate here. So it's important. All right, so let's say that I have an ID for this one. All right, and I also have the class button. So check this out. Button is double in specificity, and it's overriding whatever was after that. But I could have just said here, okay, I'm gonna have my ID to have a color of black, and this will effectively mess up with everything because an ID is the most specific selector. So even if you start concatenating this class 1,000 times, it won't override it. It won't go over it. But if we actually would have done this, interesting. So now you're targeting the ID attribute, and the class is actually more specific than it. So that's a nice little hack. Now, do keep in mind these are hacks, not a real-world class techniques for dealing with it. So do not use it unless you absolutely have to. And how am I with the time?
This is wrapping up.
All right. So important. Let's just come back to this for a second. And I didn't see you guys, but this should have been your reaction. Like, no, please, no. All right. Important does have a place in CSS, and it's mainly when not used as a hack, but it's used proactively. So you want to use it as a guarantee for when your class has such a specific intent that should be it should be pretty much a Boolean or either true or false. An example of this is, let's say that you have a class of hidden. You want it either to be hidden or not. You don't want it to be in the middle, in the like kind of like a gray area. So you can use important in there proactively. So then no other class that could be called hidden afterwards would override this kind of behavior. So if you design with this in mind, hidden, important is okay, but not as a hack. They're not as a hack. So, all right, that's it for the talk, and these are two other talks that I would recommend you guys watch. 3.14 things I didn't know about CSS, and CSS guidelines is an article that has a lot on CSS, and it has a specificity section. And that's it, and we'll take a question now.
So while Adrian's answering questions, why don't we have Skylar set up so we can put that there.
All right.
So here's a question for you, Adrian. How did you learn? What were the resources you used? Because we do have some folks here that are beginning to learn CSS and learning about how important specificity is. Yeah. And why it's since IDs and classes and nesting tags can do the same thing. What are the resources you used to learn what was important of one versus the other?
So Mozilla has a great resource on JavaScript and CSS. They have a CSS. I wouldn't remember the name exactly, but I think it's like CSS best patterns or something like that. If you just Google it, Mozilla CSS guidelines or something like that. They have a lot on CSS, super in depth, from a very beginner kind of level to super advanced stuff. And they have a section just for specificity, and they will explain to you what are the different specificity levels and how to go around some of them. Also, in the CSS guideline that has a link right here in my slides, and I'll definitely post a link on that too in the MeetUp website page. That CSS guidelines has a very good section for specificity, and also in the talk, which is actually a video with these things I didn't know about CSS, there is also a couple of examples on CSS specificity.
Awesome. Thank you so much for speaking.
Sure.
It's a brave thing to speak, and it's your first time speaking. So give me a hand again. Also, while Kyler's finishing setting up, obviously talks like these are not easy to do. So if you guys ever feel like doing a talk, no talk is too hard, or if you have something to do a talk on, it could be any type of skill level. We're open. Talk to Kyler and I and we can arrange something. We meet up every month. So, all right. Without further, our final speaker, Kyler.
All right. Hi everyone. I guess I'm going to be talking today about somewhat kind of new style for styling your styles. It's a little bit controversial. It's only been around for maybe a month or so. The general concept's been around always, but I guess as far as a actual method of styling your CSS, it's a little new. So short and sweet attribute modules. It's just a way to, instead of overloading your class attribute on an element, you can actually use the attribute selector in CSS, and effectively you're actually using that as a way to kind of piggyback off what he's saying, a way to namespace your CSS and give yourself that level of specificity that you need. This is an example from Bootstrap. Can everybody see that all right? Oh, zooming doesn't do anything. Cool. Yeah, can everyone see that? Yeah. Okay. So that's an example from Bootstrap. So the very top one, that's a button. It's got a class with button, and another class button-large, and another class button-default. So the kind of issue I have with this is the amount of class bloat there. The naming can be a little ambiguous, especially if you look at the column naming. You call it SN, call it MD. I feel like they're just not. They don't give you a great idea about what's actually inside of that element. And once again, it's repetitive and it's not really semantic. And you may say, but Kyler, it looks semantic to me, you're dumb. But what I would say to that is an actual excerpt from the W3C that the values describe the nature of the content rather than the values describe the desired presentation. And so if we go back and look at that, you can see that none of those classes actually describe the content at all, except for maybe button on the button class, which even really is still not. So I would then say, boom, in your face. Here's the same example, but now this is with the attribute module, and I'm using an actual attribute. I'm prefixing with AM just so I can keep the name spacing different from, maybe you're using Angular and you got directives on things. You don't want to have name clashes there. So I have an AM button, and I'm just saying, hey, it's large and it's primary. And if we look down at styles, we can see I can have the overreaching AM button styles that I want, and then to be specific, I know it's a large button, it's a primary button. I can put those styles there. Granted, it does make the CSS a bit more wordy, I guess, maybe not quite as easy to read, but I think the trade-off is that your HTML becomes easier to read.
Does HTML validate?
It will validate if you put a data prefix in front of it. So if you said data button or data AM button, data is an actual validated attribute, which is it's similar.
Analytics.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a hack, but similar for Angular things as well. This is just another example. Here I'm using the columns, and so I'm using an AM row attribute and an AM columns attribute. I think what's really cool about this is that if I want to put some styles on the columns, like I want to, if you're using Foundation or Bootstrap, you're used to saying, okay, I want it at a small viewport size. I want it to be 8 columns. At a large, I want it to be 10. Vice versa, and you may go down the line. You could have a very long string in your class. What I like about this method is you can actually use you can use things like colons, semicolons, whatever have you. You can put any string you want there. So what I've chosen to do here is kind of almost a hash style. I've got AM columns. 8, I'm thinking from a mobile first perspective, so 8 is going to be for my small. Medium, the medium key is going to be 10. Large is going to be 8. And that may not be specific, that may not be more legible to you, but that again is kind of the beauty of this, is that you can define what style you want to do it.
So, what is, I see the SCSS. What is the difference between SCSS?
I forgot to take that up.
Okay.
I did have a SAS example there. I ended up taking that out because it does kind of, it's not as pretty if you use SAS. And that's one thing I will 100% agree. It makes your CSS a little uglier, but I think it makes your HTML.
But this is regular CSS, it's not necessarily.
This is regular CSS.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. I just forgot to take that on the thing.
It's still valid.
It's still valid, yeah, that's CSS, however. And and so you can see I'm doing the same thing. I'm using the attribute selector to say, okay, my medium 10, and then I would put my column styles there. Okay, so kind of, what's cool about it? You can namespace your modifiers and styles. You can avoid name clashes. In this instance, I'm using, say I have a header and a div, and I want the text inside the header to be centered, and I want the column beneath it to be centered also. Instead of having, the text align center or text this, that. It doesn't matter. I don't have to worry about name clashes. I just know that center in the context of a header is going to be text center, and center in context of a column is going to be margin 0. And so I like that aspect of it. I work a lot with Angular, and I think this is another reason why I kind of like this a little bit. It kind of follows those same aesthetics of having directives on your elements and whatnot. By definition, the HTML is more semantic, and I know I use that as an example to kind of like throw it in your face, but I don't think that the way that Bootstrap does it is wrong by any means. Just wanted to create some controversy, I guess. I think what's best about this style, in fact, in the way that I would prefer to use it, is to use it only on framework styles, to keep my framework styles separate from my day-to-day site styles. So, I've got my grid stuff, my button stuff, anything that's like heavily reusable. I think this is a good use case for it. And then when I got things that are a little bit more specific, then I can use my classes to kind of get dirty. This is something I kind of discovered when I was researching this a bit. It's a pretty neat mix-in for using the AM style with SAS. And this kind of does all the hard work for you. Just drop the mix-in in, and then you can just use an include, and you get basically whatever the string is that you're passing, and it'll spit out your valid attribute selector CSS. And admittedly, it's not perfect. Like I said, the CSS is a little bit messier, a little harder to read, and it's new and scary. And it is slower. I say potentially because I looked a lot, and whenever people have ran unit tests to compare class selectors versus attribute selectors always turn out being the slowest. But when I actually ran benchmark tests, I actually found a benchmarking thing that allows me to feed any site that I choose, and it will give me just a regular CSS version of it, and then it'll also do a version where it converts it to the AM style and then renders that, and then as such I can compare the render times. And when I did that, granted it was a very messy test, and I just did it quickly so I could kind of see the differences. The attribute module actually ended up being, on average, slightly faster. And, that's a matter of milliseconds. That could be anything from server load times and stuff like that. But I would say that if slowing down is what's holding you back from maybe trying something new, or whatever the case is, I don't think that's a great argument, because it's not one. It's such a small amount. Even if it is slower, it's such a small amount that I doubt you're going to see it unless you're working in the most extreme use case. And just some extra notes I wanted to add. As you asked, you can prefix any of your attributes with data to make them validate. And I think this does adhere to the BEM style. It may not be the usual syntax that you see with some of Adrian's code. You might have seen that he was using the BEM, which is block element module or modifier for those who aren't really familiar with it. Like I said, the syntax isn't the same, but it keeps the same modularity and namespacing ideas. Suite CSS is just a suite of mixins that do a whole load of things, and there is an AM format for that, as well as a handful of really great grid frameworks and other things that have already been kind of going this direction. Yeah, there you go. It's recommended that you prefix your attributes with AM, so that you don't have any name clashes with other attributes that you may be using, or you can choose whatever other prefix you want to use. And yeah, that's really it. That's attribute module. Any questions? Yes.
So I thought it was really interesting that you decided to make the HTML nicer to read versus the CSS. What do you think are the pros and cons of doing that? I mean, from my perspective, at least, I spend more time doing JavaScript. So for me, yeah, it's way better to have HTML that's easier to read. But like, what about you?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, like, if you're working in it, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be messing more with the CSS than the HTML. Your HTML gets thrown down and then you do all the styling. And so yeah, that is a good point. If it's not if it's not super legible and easy to read on the CSS side, maybe that's slowing it down more. But once again, like I said, I guess I just like the Angular look of things. It's very modularized to me. And generally when I'm I could be working on an element that's got 3 to 4 different Angular directives on it. It's got a class string that's like a mile long. And it gets bothersome to look at, and so it'd be nicer if I could just like look at it instantly and be like, oh, okay, this is this module. I can go over here and go and toy with whatever piece I need to toy with there. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not perfect. It's kind of a trade-off. It's really just a new idea, something to look at, something to play with. But I think, with that being said, I think I might toy around with it for like my next website or something. Next version of my site, just to do something kind of cool and a bleeding edge. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes. Cool.
Awesome, guys. So that pretty much wraps it up for this month's Friend of Meetup. Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate you sitting through the talks. Again, if you guys have any feedback for any of our speakers, compliments or constructive criticism, please feel free to leave a note on the Meetup. We also have links to the appropriate slides and stuff. I'm sure Kyler, you can post your slides. Yeah, post your slides on the Meetup. So otherwise, yeah. If you're open to doing a talk next month, please let us know. It's Kyler and I, and yeah. And otherwise, we will see you next month. But I think a bunch of us are going to go for beer afterwards. So if you're interested, let us know. All right, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.